I'm starting here with one of the chest patterns I already had in storage, for one with quite a prominent hunched back, because Monoco has a hunched back. Working with 10mm EVA foam for this one to give it some structure and rigidity. You can see as it's starting to take shape here. And you can see here how the EVA foam holds its shape once it's on, with a good pattern to get all of the dimensions in. You don't even need to use too much heat. I then cut out the belt pieces to make sure they were equal width and varying lengths in line with the game model, and just to try those on with the armour. And once I was happy with those, I came to texturing those belt panels to make them look more like wood. Here you can see I've got a wood burner or a soldering iron, and that just allows me to burn in the wood grooves and lines. Don't forget to wear your PPE. And I then moved on to perhaps the most iconic piece of the whole Monoco costume, his mask. Still working on 10mm EVA foam here, and I've got some Polyprops foam clay. You can see I've started some already, but I basically roll this into worms and then use it to add the raised elements and details through the center and around the edge of the mask. I then do the same again for the feet, so I've just taken an old pair of shoes, glued some more 10mm just rectangles on, and then using the foam clay I'm sculpting out the toe knuckles, the toenails. For the actual toenails themselves, I've cut little shapes out of warbler because they're a bit more durable. And then with the majority of the foam work done, I set about painting it. I also use Polyprops primers to prime the foam before I get started. And then I just use acrylic paints in varying mixtures to mix all of the colors I need and to get the finished paint job. Also preview of the bell here, which my friend 3D modeled and printed for me. I painted it gold and then started layering up white acrylic paint over the top, going on heavy in places to give that sort of texture to look like what I'm not going to say it looks like. And then I moved on to the fur for the mask and the body. For the mask, I actually managed to find some pre-crimped wig wefts on the internet. These pre-cut, pre-crimped wig wefts already had like all of the volume that you usually get from like backcombing different wigs and strands. And then I could section those out and glue those around the edge to give that realistic free-flowing hair as opposed to fur. I glued them in one section at a time and then used 2mm foam to back those. And you might be able to see at the top I included a little visor just above the mask so that I can see through the fur and mask without having to remove it. I also added 2 extra strands of 2mm foam down the outside of the back to block out the side profile of the mask when it's being worn. For the back and also the arms later, I used long pile white fur as a base and then just added wig wefts to the front using the same methods as on the mask. This allowed me to style it and add more detail at the front-facing areas, while towards the back and the lesser seen parts could just sort of blend out into a more basic fur that was also obviously much cheaper and easier to do than building it all from separate wig wefts. I'll style these later with Uhu glue and hairspray in the same way one would style a wig to give them the definition and shape. Next, I took some colour-matched green fabric for the skirt and started distressing that. So I just roughly cut the bottom in the shape similar to the game model and then took a wire brush to start distressing the end to increase the frayed elements of that before cutting some extra horizontal slits further up the skirt. I didn't feel like it looked evenly weathered all over, and then I could distress those slits in the same manner to make it more overall match the game model. Now for the rest of the details and accessories, for the lower arms I used 5mm EVA foam this time and glued in zips so that I could open and close those. Obviously I painted them in the same manner I painted the wooden belt, but here I'm using just some puff paint to give that raised texture of a bolt rather than gluing on an actual bolt. And it just gives the effect of the screws that Monoco has at his elbows. And then of course go on to work on the different accessories. So one of his arms has bracelets and the other has ropes. And then of course add in the Nevron feet chains and the leather section that hang from the belt for the other sort of accessory details. It's always worth going through the process of test fitting it at each stage to make sure it fits you and also fits together so that it can move effectively and that it's all going to function when the build is complete. For his hands, I've just painted up some white gloves so that I still have full mobility, and the chains are actually just off-the-shelf plastic chains bought from the internet. The last thing to make then was the backpack, and rather than making lots of Nevron feet out of foam, I opted to use some sticks that I found at a local park. I took an old backpack and just cable tied all of the sticks directly to the backpack. I didn't take the time to sand one edge of the sticks into spikes as the feet are in the game because I did not want to be weapon checked for my backpack. This ended up being quite a heavy method, especially to wear with the rest of the costume, but it was obviously much quicker and cheaper than the alternative. And finally here, as you can see, the finished cosplay all on. I managed to put it all on by myself, with all of the attachments short of the clips to hold the tops of the shoulders in. And as you'll have seen on my social media recently, the finished, fully mobile Monoco cosplay. I had a lot of requests for this, and I'm sure I haven't answered all of your questions, so feel free to add any more in the comments. But yeah, I hope it was helpful. I hope this is what you were hoping for. I hope this feels achievable and doable. And thanks if you stayed for this long.